Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton, and I am back with you today with some really exciting guests. I have been so excited as we've been waiting for them to come on the podcast. We've had this scheduled for a little bit of time, and I've had them on my list of people to get on the podcast because I know you are going to be so blessed by just listening to their story. It's Janet and Geoff Benge, and they are the authors of the YWAM Christian Heroes Then and Now and the YWAM Heroes of History audiobooks. And I know many of you have heard them. As a matter of fact, it's been really cool because there have been oftentimes where I'm on a video conference call or I'm doing as a matter of fact, just the other day, I was doing an interview with a homeschool mom and author, and she had a bookcase behind her and she had a whole lineup of these YWAM books. And I said, I'm going to get to interview the Benges soon. I'm so excited. So Janet and Geoff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yes, I am thrilled. For those of you who are not familiar with their books, you want to be, trust me. And I know I've told you this on the podcast before, but you know, we're filming this documentary, Schoolhouse Rocked, but it's not just a documentary where you just go watch the movie, be done with it and walk away and then go, okay, well, what in the world do I do now? How do I do this homeschooling thing? And so we really are working to provide you with excellent resources that will help you in your homeschool journey and really work to lead your children's hearts towards Christ. And this has been one of the ways that our family has been successful in doing that, is listening to your audiobooks. I mean, it's just been incredible. We travel a lot, of course, and so as we've traveled, we've listened to several of them. We've got a stack of them, and we have really enjoyed listening to the stories that you've come up with, because they're not stories that you've made up. They're just stories that you've taken from missionaries or different people in history, and you've put them into story form for,
right.
I want to say for children, but they're not just for children, because
no,
adults enjoy them just as much.
Oh,
because
yes, with a big adult readership.
Yes, we do, certainly. And so tell us a little bit how you got started on this whole journey of writing for YWAM and writing these stories of missionaries and heroes from the past.
Okay. Shall I talk about that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, we started out, we're from New Zealand, so you don't have to worry about our accents for the next 30 minutes. I think we're Australians. And we started out as missionaries with YWAM when after we got married, and we had a daughter. And when she was nearly 1 year old, we went out with YWAM, and we started off on the Anastasis Mercy ship in Honolulu, and then we went to the Philippines, and we really weren't writers by any stretch of the imagination. I am dyslexic, so I had a very mixed bag of schooling. Sometimes, depending on the teacher, some teachers were really supportive and just thought I did great writing, and other teachers just, embarrassed me in front of the class by asking me to write things on the blackboard so everyone could laugh. So I had the real gamut of experiences at school with writing. And Geoff, how about your experiences? Mr. Smarty Pants?
No, well, actually, that I'm a writer is quite surprising even to me, because when I was in elementary school, I had to have remedial reading. I was terrible. And then in high school, I failed English twice. So the idea of writing or just anything to do with English was like, But somehow I managed to get my things together, and I do have a degree in history and philosophy now, and somehow overcame my poor English to take up writing. So that was a surprise. When we first started as a missionaries, I was a cook and I was a food service director in New Zealand. And then I was the head on the ship and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So I moved from cooking to writing. So it was really an interesting transition.
Well, there we go. So yeah, you wouldn't vote us the most likely to succeed as writers. And we went to the Philippines. We lived in a little mountain village called Antipolo Rizal up in the outside of Manila. And we were just doing general missionary work. And soon after we arrived, I looked out of our hotel. We lived in a hotel, which sounds glamorous, on the 7th floor, but had no water and very little electricity. So that makes it tricky. Because
yes,
no elevator.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, that was the least of our worries.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, flushing the toilet was an exercise, literally. But anyway, we had only been there a few days, and I looked down out of our window, and I saw this group of people trailing all the way down the hill, and it was like 7 a.m. And I said to Jeff, we must have something big going on here today. And so we went downstairs for breakfast. We said, hey, what's going on? They're like, well, nothing. And we're like, well, what are all these people, snaking down the hill? It was like 150 of them. And they said, oh, it's just Tuesday, and we give out one piece of used clothing to anybody who comes on a Tuesday morning. And, we open the doors at 9. And I had grown up in New Zealand, which, I had never seen a really poor person or a hungry person. It was a little paradise. Mm-hmm. And so I was just deeply, deeply shocked. I was very naive. It was my first, Philippines was really my first experience with extreme poverty. And I was like, oh my goodness, if the people back home at church could see what I see, they would give. So we just started writing about it for our own newsletter. And then other people at the hotel said, hey, can we use your newsletter, some of the wording from that? So that was fine. So we just when we did a newsletter, we just kind of started handing it around, and other people would use it. And then we got kicked out of the hotel at gunpoint, but that's another story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we had to go somewhere, and it's the head of YWAM for the Philippines asked us, he said, oh, I hear that you guys are writers. And like
it was news to us.
Because you'd been writing to people.
Yes.
That makes you a writer.
And we were like, well, not really. And, the thought of writing like over 1,000 words was very daunting. And we argued a lot when we had to do it together. And it didn't make it any better, because when we started writing, we started with a European typewriter, and some of the keys are in different places. And Jeff said that he could type, and then he would type wrong because the typewriter was in a different. So you wouldn't say it was a fortuitous beginning, but anyway, we went to Manila and we started writing, designed and wrote the national newsletter for the Philippines. And that became very popular. And we wrote a lot of stories about people. And this was back in 1984, 85.
Okay.
So
now, when you say you started writing letters about people, were you writing letters about missionaries, or were you writing letters about the people?
The people that we met in the situations they found themselves in on the dump.
Okay.
And just,
we had a lot of ministries running with Youth with a Mission in the Philippines that worked with the poor, because Manila was a huge city and it had more than 2 million homeless people.
Wow.
Some lived on dumps, and the most dense slum in the world at that stage was in Manila. So we would go out to the teams that were working there and follow them around and write about what they were doing and write about the people, and to try and sort of, take a different view than some of the stuff that we did. So we tended to write a lot of story type things about them. And,
wow.
And that led to the next thing, which it just shows you, like sometimes getting started and just taking the next step, rather than trying to figure out how it's all going to work, this is what happened, So we just took the next step and we started writing for the newsletter. And then we got invited by Jan Rogers, who was Lauren Cunningham's sister, to a writing school in Texas. And it was a little laughable, really, because we didn't have, I don't know how much support we got a month, but maybe, I don't know, $50 or something. It was.
Oh, Nellie didn't make it there because I worked in the office where they had the only phone on the YWAM base. And so she called me up the first time, and we had probably didn't mention that we had adopted a Filipino son.
Okay.
So, and he had some health issues. And so our plan was to go back to New Zealand where healthcare is free, et cetera, and deal with that. So she called me up and asked me to this writing workshop school that they were going to have. And I said, so she called me 4 times in the end. And then the 4th time I said, okay. Well, because at that stage we'd run into some difficulties with our son's adoption, all kinds of crazy stuff. So we couldn't take them straight back to New Zealand. And so then we got to, so, well, why not? Why not? It was overwhelming. As Janet said, like writing 1,000 words was a lot. Well, we're supposed to show up with a manuscript for a novel, at least 1,000 words. I'm like, that's a lot of words. But anyway, we set out.
So we didn't have the money, but some friends of ours in New Zealand, an older couple had sold their farm and they tithed to us.
Wow.
And so we really had the money. It was just quite amazing. So like, okay, off we go to Texas. So we went from Manila to Texas. We went from LA to East Texas on a Greyhound bus.
Oh, wow.
when you don't know the country, that sounds like a good way to get around. So that was its own story. And the writing school, John and Elizabeth Sherrill were our teachers. Mm-hmm. And they did the Cross and Switchblade and the Hiding mm-hmm. Place, and they were the editors of Guideposts. And it was just like, for me, the light bulbs went on. I'd always loved to read. Even though I was dyslexic, I still absolutely loved to read. It was my favorite thing to do. And I had never thought about how people write. I had honestly thought that it just kind of was downloaded to you into your brain and out your hand. And it just sounds silly now, but I had no idea that there were techniques involved. I had no idea that, there were certain places to put things. I just thought it was luck if you wrote something that someone else wanted to read. And John Elizabeth took The Hiding Place, I think, wasn't it? And deconstructed it for us.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my goodness, they deliberately put this in here because of this and whatever. And so I was able to, I thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it, now that I can see that it's something you do. Mm-hmm. So we started writing straight after that. And that was how many years ago?
Oh, that was in 1980. Yeah, that was 33 years ago. So we've been writing books ever since and making our living doing that. We seem to have what it took to write books.
Yeah.
So
it was all very surprising, really. I mean, it's not something that we imagined.
Mostly ghostwrote for the first 10 or 12 years of our writing career, books for other people, all sorts. And then the opportunity to write the Heroes books came up and we switched to doing that.
And I think really our motivation for that was, it was a youth with a mission. And so people came looking for missionary books that would be interesting for kids. And there weren't any. And so we started going out and looking, and we found some really exciting stories told in really boring ways. And we were like, this is ridiculous. This, this story is absolutely mind-blowing. And yet you probably couldn't get a kid to read it.
Right.
So I think that became our mission, was to really, reintroduce these heroes of faith to a new generation in a way that they would be able to receive it and really appreciate the struggle and the drama and the miracle of, their lives. Yeah. So we started off with 4 books and now we're up to 79. So it's sort of the run lasted longer than we had.
just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's such an amazing story, though. I love to see how the Lord took both of you who, Janet, with you being dyslexic, and Geoff, you didn't read in English. And you just brought him what you have, and he multiplied that, and he's done something with the two of you. And I think you might have an idea, but you may not really understand the full scope of how the ministry that you have had has impacted literally hundreds of thousands of lives, including the lives of our family. The first, it's not the first one we listened to actually, but my favorite book that you wrote was George Mueller. And that one has literally been life-changing for our whole family. We've listened to it twice, and we have several of them, but that one we've listened to twice because the Lord has our family in a situation right now where we're having to depend on him completely for everything. And my very favorite part of that book is where George Mueller and his orphans are standing around the table, and they have nothing to eat and they have nothing to drink. And he
Mhm.
says, okay, we're going to pray and we're going to thank the Lord for the food that he is about to provide. And they have nothing. They have empty plates. And they stand, they
Mhm.
pray, and he says, thank you, Lord, for this food that we're about to eat. And then there's a knock at the door, and it's the local baker. And then a few minutes after he leaves, there's a knock on the door, and it's the milkman, and
Mhm.
how God provided for him. And I mean, that's just one of many
Mhm.
stories.
Yes.
But
Right.
I don't know that I ever, and I actually, recently, a friend of mine, she mailed me the actual autobiography of George Mueller.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know that I ever really would have known the story of George Mueller
Right.
had I not
Right.
heard your story that you had written. And same with Corrie ten Boom. I mean, there just are so many of them that God has really, really worked through the two of you
Mhm.
who just brought what you had, and you were
Mhm.
not capable of doing it on your own,
Mm-mm.
but through the power of God, he has used you in an amazing way.
Oh, thank
Let's
you.
take a quick break, and then let's come back, and I want to talk about a bunch more stuff.
Sure thing.
We are back with Janet and Geoff Benge from YWAM, Heroes of History and Christian Heroes Then and Now. So you've written several missionary stories, and then you've written several Heroes of History stories. Can you kind of break that down for us and explain the difference between the two?
The Christian Heroes books, we're writing about missionaries, pastors, people who, through their faith, have made a huge impact on the world for the Lord. The Heroes of History series came about after a while. The guys who run YWAM Publishing decided, well, there was a need also in the homeschool market for stuff. More specifically, there are lots of amazing people in the broader history that we weren't doing. So they asked us to do that, and we agreed. And then they decided, well, let's focus first out on American history. And so for the first 20 books, then we sort of told the story of American history through starting with Columbus, in moving on through. So that's the difference there. I think that the Christian heroes, as they say, they're much more Christian oriented, but that's not to say that the heroes of history aren't. And I think that one of the skills and one of the things that we do when we write a book, we say to people, we want to entertain, we want to inform, and we want to inspire. And so we're not interested really in telling a story unless it inspires people. And so we've scoured through, all the various American characters to find people that we thought were inspiring to us and hopefully inspiring to other people, because those are the kinds of stories that we can really get inside and tell. So that's the biggest difference between the two series, though they almost look identical.
Yes. Now, on the Heroes of History, are those Christian heroes of history, or are those just people who have done things throughout history,
Mhm.
who have just had a huge impact
Right.
somewhere in
They're
the world?
just heroes. And some of them, like I have here Elizabeth Fry, who is a hero of history, but she was a Quaker and a Christian. So it's, if they are a Christian and a hero of history, we put that in. But the emphasis is not on like going out like Gladys Aylward did and being a missionary in China.
Right.
So our arrangement is that if there's a Christian component to their life, we definitely bring that out and explain how, or show how that impacts their decisions and their character.
Yeah.
So it's not an either or, but it's more on their vocation.
Okay.
Yeah, and so some of them in that series were more, and we have actually Billy Graham in that series as pastor, so he's in there. And we've also done William Wilberforce now, as we've moved away from the American ones, who was, of course, a devout Christian and led the fight against slavery in the British Empire. So, yeah.
They mix up a little.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say that they have the same inspirational theme, that people who do amazing things, for the world, for other people, and, in the case of America, for the founding of the country and its progress forward, to, the Christian heroes that go out, and then not all missionaries, some of them are doctors, some of them are different, types of people. It's, but they're all about, you can do something, you can make, you can change the world around you.
Yes, yes. So how do you go through the process of once you find somebody, whether a hero or, I mean, I guess they're all heroes in one form or another, but whether they're missionaries or just someone else who's just done something to impact the world, how do you go through the process of finding those people? Because certainly I don't imagine that you just knew all these people off the top of your head and said, oh, we have a whole huge
Whoa.
list of people we're going to write about.
Right.
How do you find your subjects?
Well, there's two ways really. One is, YWAM is out doing a lot of homeschool conventions and things. And so the people who are at them have the ears open, and they're always listening for suggestions. And then also we get suggestions emailed to us and letters written to us with suggestions. So that's one way the publisher kind of brings them to the table. Or the other way is that when we are writing something, we find someone else's life. It's like, oh my goodness, we have to write them as well. So then we go off do a little research, and then we bring them to the table. So once we've got the people's on the table, their stories on the table, then we have to decide, is there enough material, the kind of material that we need to write the story the way that is entertaining enough for people to keep reading. And that's always a little interesting. And then we have to see where it fits into the series.
Right. And in the earlier stages of the Christian heroes, because of I was born and raised in the Plymouth Brethren denomination in New Zealand, which is why we know about George Mueller, because he was one of the co-founders of the denomination. So he was always being on my radar growing up. But in New Zealand, the Brethren had the highest per capita number of missionaries in the field of any other denomination.
Wow.
And so we always had these people, and half of them were related to me, would come back and tell us these stories. And so we knew, and I, knew so many of the stories that we wanted to tell. So some of those have just simply kind of like, man, that story inspired me when I was a kid. So let's have a look and see if we can't tell it here. And so some of them have come. That's how Sundar Singh, we used to have a little, they used to show a movie about this guy. My parents had a house at the beach. And so in the summer, and these guys would come and they would do a program for kids and show these gospel movies. And every year they showed this movie about this guy, Sundar Singh. And I remember it was just, every time I was just riveted for him. So like, man, we got to write this guy's story. And it's, and we did, and it started slow, and now it's a really big seller in the series. So it's, and Gladys Aylward, we knew about her. And of course, the guys in Ecuador, Jim Elliott, and because they were all from the same denomination as I was. So those stories all circulated.
Yeah, I got to meet Elizabeth Elliott once. This is many years ago. She was speaking at a conference in Los Angeles, and I was so excited just to shake her hand. This is amazing. Like, I'm shaking the hand of Elizabeth Elliott.
Yeah,
she's such an incredible woman. So once you figure out who you're going to write about, how long does it take you to actually write the story, do all the research, write the story, and bring it all the way to completion?
Well, as you know, life is full of distractions.
Yes.
So it really depends on how many distractions we face. We can do, depending on the book too, but sometimes we've done a book in 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the fastest we ever wrote one of the books in the series, and I can't remember which one it was 5 weeks. On an average, they were taking us 3 months, but when we first started writing, we were actually turning out 6 of them a year. So we were moving through them pretty quickly.
We were younger then. Right now, we probably, we're doing a lot of other things now. So we probably have 2 a year that we write. And basically, once we have settled on a person and signed the contract, then it's time to get to work. And, it's Janet and Geoff Benge, but I mean, really, you can't write with another person. Writing is a very individual activity. So we've really honed down how we divide up what we do and really cut down the friction and the duplication and things.
So how do you do that? Because I was going to ask that next is how do you, I know you work as a husband-wife team, which is amazing. My husband and I, we work together. But he has
And,
his
it's amazing.
things that he does, and I have my things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's neat because the Lord's given each one of us different gifts and talents and abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so we run with that, and then we're
you
able
have to respect that.
Yes.
Sure.
I think that's one thing that we've learned over the years is, I might have an opinion on something that is sort of Jeff's role.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point it's his role, and he might have an opinion on something on my role. But, if you keep crossing over all the time, it slows everything down.
Sure.
So how do we do it, honey?
We do it. Janet does the front end, and I basically do the back end. She reads. She's a much faster reader than I am. And so she will cut through the books, and we read an awful lot of books in the course of writing these things.
Just look behind us.
Gold,
Yes.
dry books one at a time. So she goes through. She's very good at piecing together the story, finding a way through the story that we want to tell of this person's life.
Mm-hmm.
So she puts that together, and then she writes the first draft of the manuscript, and then sometimes she'll leave gaps for me to research and write, because I write a lot of the scenes in the books. So I'll go through and do that, and then I'll fact check and double check her on the history, etc. Sometimes things get, and continuity, etc. And so I'll go through several times, and then to the end of just really polishing up the language, get it to sound nice and roll off your tongue, and then goes back to Janet to go through one more time, and then I'll look over it once more, and then it's done.
Okay.
And that is one thing that makes it go so fast for us, is that when we push send, it's gone, and we don't see it again until it's a box of books at our door.
Wow.
And the traditional normal way to do it is that you get the blue lines and you read it through, and you kind of have long discussions with your editor. And we found fairly early on, well, I speak for myself, it made me very grumpy.
Very grumpy.
And I just didn't add anything to the experience to be arguing over individual words or trying to figure out what they changed and why. And so we made the decision that we would just leave it to them, and that it was a team effort, and that together we'd get it out the door. So that's really taken a lot of stress off us. So it really is gone when it's gone.
Yeah, it does. And it's, we write, it's mostly just line editing that gets done after them, because we're pretty good at putting together the structure. So there's not a lot of structural editing that gets done on them. And we trust the editor. That's the same editor who's edited all the books, and she does a great job. Every now and again you have a quibble, but hey,
Sure.
all that going backwards and forwards slows the whole process down. And for me, the part that I like most is actually, taking this person's life and making a story. And when I push that button and send, I'm on to the next thing. So I really, I've done my best effort, I believe, to get that out the door. Then it's the publisher's job to, make its thing. If it needs some work to, and I'll carry on to the next project.
Well, you have made a great team, and you are a great team with YWAM. And then you do not narrate the books. Those are narrated by whom?
Yeah, by professional actors. There's a male and a female for the different ones.
And now nearly all of them are have been turned into audio books now. I think they've almost caught up, because they started when there was about 60 some books in the series.
Okay.
They have two professional voice actors. The woman reads all the woman's parts, and guy reads the guy's ones, and they do a fabulous job.
They do. And
they really sell like crazy, the audio versions.
Yep.
And I remember one time I hadn't heard any of them, and we were at the YWAM booth when they were the homeschool show here in Florida, and I was standing there. I'm like, well, they had one of the audios playing. I think it was Amy Carmichael, wasn't it? Yeah. And which is one 20 years ago we wrote that book, and I'm like, it sounds kind of familiar. What on earth are they playing here? And then I discovered it was our book. I'm like, it sounds pretty good. And it's really funny as an author, because you write a book and you kind of hear it in your head as you're writing it, how the quote would flow. And so it's really interesting to hear somebody else take your words and, you know, and a voice actor and read them and put emphasis in places. Then you go like, oh, but I wanted the, you know, it's just, but it's just, it's actually really fascinating. And you learn a lot about your prose and how you
Sure.
strung things together. So it's quite a fascinating process too.
Yeah, it is interesting. You know, my husband and I will read books to our girls, and you know, we have a 9-year-old, and I still enjoy reading Green Eggs and Ham, and I'll read it, and then my husband will read it, and he reads it completely differently than I do, and I'm like, that's not how you read Green Eggs and Ham. You know, like
No.
I just have it in my head of how it's
Right.
supposed to be read. It, like, clearly the way I read it is the way that, you know,
Absolutely.
Dr. Seuss wrote it, or Theodore Geisel wrote it. So anyway, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you a couple quick questions. Do you each have your favorite book? Can you pick? It's a hard question.
It's a hard question. There's probably in the Heroes of History series, my favorite book in there is
You can give your top three.
yeah, Meriwether Lewis is probably my favorite, just simply because of what they accomplished, and because Meriwether Lewis was prone to bouts of depression and stuff, and he knew that, so he linked up with William Clark. So that's why they were co-leaders, because he knew but it was amazing, you know, what they did. They went across and came back. So I think one that I really enjoyed writing, and I think it's still a really good book, is the one on Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Okay.
It was very difficult to write because for so long, or so many of the books were written from the victor's perspective, because we're writing about American and English, excuse me, missionaries and leaders, etc. And so we're writing about wars and stuff from the viewpoint of the victors. And so now we have to write this story, and I have to tell you about Germany and what it's like to live there, but I have to show it to you through the eyes of a little boy in World War I, and we grow through that. And so it was a real challenge to get that together, and then to tease Dietrich Bonhoeffer out from his theology. So many of the books deal so much, they're like this thick, because it's all about his theology. So to tease that out, but I thought once we did it, our son-in-law, his father is from German.
Oh, wow.
And so we gave it to him and to read, but he was born here, but his parents were all, and they all grew up speaking German. And he said to us, he said, this is amazing. He said, this is exactly how the Germans back home used to tell me it was, you know. And so we had gotten inside and did that. So I'm very proud of, you know, that book, and it's well received. Of course, Adoniram Judson is another amazing story. That's just like, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool. I'll have to listen to Bonhoeffer, because I've actually started reading Bonhoeffer, Eric Metaxas's book, Bonhoeffer, and I haven't made it through yet.
Good luck.
Woe is right. It's so big. I got the book, and then I think it was Christmas or my birthday, my husband bought me the audio version of it. And I haven't, I've made it a few chapters in, but it's a very heavy,
very dense,
very big, intense book.
Read it several times. Yes.
And it's more a matter of time for me, that I don't have a ton of time to read, which is why I do a lot of audio, because I can listen while I'm doing laundry or dishes or, you know, other things. And so I should listen to Bonhoeffer. I hadn't thought about listening to that, because then I can get the most important parts of the story.
I think so.
So Janet, what about you? Do you have a favorite?
There's a lot of them that I love, but I suspect that my favorite must be George Mueller, because when I talk about our books, the only person that I can't talk about without crying is George Mueller. So somewhere deep in my heart, I think he must be my favorite. I like the end. I think where he's such a simple person. He hasn't acquired a lot of money or anything like that. He's stuck to who he was the whole way through, and I just find that very touching. So I suppose I will have to say George Mueller. Yeah,
I love it. George Mueller, like I said, he's definitely he and Corrie ten Boom, I think, are probably tied for my two favorite. I absolutely love both their stories. I've read The Hiding Place several times. I love that book. I think that it is a book that every Christian in the whole world should read at least one time. Again, just to see the faithfulness of our God in a situation that seems completely hopeless.
Yeah.
And but to see how she and her family just stood firm on their faith, and they said, we will not budge. We will
Mm-hmm.
follow the Lord no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And man,
Yeah.
God has used that story in amazing ways in my life as well. So, like I said, we're out of time, but very, very quickly, you said that you have study guides that go along
Mm-hmm.
with the books and audio books.
Right.
Where can explain those very quickly, and then where can people find those?
Okay. Well, we also, I'll just quickly say that we have most of the books are in Spanish. So if you didn't know
wow.
that.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
Pretty cool. And then the study guides are online. You can find them at YWAM Publishing.
YWAMpublishing.com.
And
Okay.
they are, I wrote the first 10 of them, and I was a teacher in New Zealand. So they are they're a unit guide that's very integrated.
Okay.
You have lots of choices. What was children. So I'll be putting a list of those two on. We've just got a new Facebook page, which I'd like to invite everyone to join with us. It's called Heroes Then and Now, and we're doing a promotion right now. If you leave a comment, we put you in a contest, for a drawing for 2 of our books. So we'd love to have you come on over to our page and interact with us and ask us any questions that you have.
Okay, that's fantastic. And then you also mentioned that you have the several of the American history heroes. You have those in a list of chronological order, you said?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can point
that's a great supplement.
Yes. So, if you want to read them in chronological order, if you're doing it as a supplement for history or whatever, you can go and find those on. I'll put a link on our Facebook page.
Yes, they're available on our YWAMpublishing.com's website. You find them under downloadable extra material under one of the tabs. But we'll put a link to them. Yeah.
Okay, so, fantastic. So people can learn more about you and your books at YWAMpublishing.com, correct? And then I also found your website, which is bengebooks.com.
And that is in the process, yes, of being redone and rebuilt right now as we speak. So bright and shiny new one up there very soon.
If you really want to connect with us, I think going to our Facebook page would be the best thing, which is Heroes Then and Now.
Okay.
So that's kind of the way to, I think, the easiest way to ask us questions. So.
Okay. And you monitor that yourself. So you actually, okay, fantastic.
So I'm on it every day.
Great. We will put links on there in the show notes so people can get right back to you. And thank you again. You two are such a blessing. I love what you have done. I love what you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to just impact my family and the family of so many people. And a lot of it's not just homeschool families, I know, but I know that you've provided a great resource for those who are just trying to lead their kids towards Christ. So God's used you in a big way. He's still doing that. And I really, really appreciate you coming on today and just sharing your story with us. You're a huge blessing.